All right, it is later in the same day that I just recorded the last one, and I finished reading The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I read this while other videos were rendering. I've also brought out The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn to kind of compare the two, because they are very, very intrinsically linked. I think reading Adventures of Tom Sawyer is a great reminder of how far people come as readers. I read this when I was in 6th grade. I think it was the sixth grade when we read it, and I mean we probably spent a month reading this. I mean, yeah, there's 18 chapters, so we probably spent 2 weeks reading this, right? And I just read it in, at most, an hour and a half of straight reading. So yeah, you know, even if it doesn't feel like it, you do come pretty far as a reader. The actual book itself is, I mean, it's fun in a boyish way. There's not a lot of depth to it. It's very much just exists there. It's told in a very boyish manner, which is also really, really interesting when you compare The Adventures of Tom Sawyer to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I looked this up very, very briefly, but in Tom Sawyer's like 12, which is like, it seems to be too old of an age to be writing and thinking in this way, right? Because when you think about it, that's like going into 7th grade, right? So it doesn't quite, I don't think this quite matches up. It's very, very, very boyish. And then we go to Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which only takes place like a year later, and at most a year later, and Huck Finn is described as being like 13 to 14, which he's already a year older than Tom Sawyer, so he's already 13 in Tom Sawyer, and he's only at most a year older in Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And just the style and the word choice and just how dense it is really, really, really dramatic. And you don't get that just from reading one of the two books. You have to read both books to really get that. And I think really the most poignant, most interesting part about this is the very end of Tom Sawyer, which describes Huck Finn not wanting to live as this kind of upright society, and wants to live kind of on his own, doesn't want to have responsibilities, that sort of thing, which is a very boy thing to do, right? But also, just by looking at the difference here in 1 year, but then also who our characters are and who's narrating, we see that Huck Finn is actually the more adult one, even though he has what seems to be the more boyish attitude towards the world. And I think it's a great kind of worldwide reminder that, like, hey, you know, just because you look nice and you have money does not make you inherently better than other people. As I had mentioned when I initially did the Huck Finn reading, is that I really don't think that Huck Finn is as racist as people think it is, at least in my vision of it, which certainly I'm not the right person to say it. One of the difficult things that I had mentioned when I was doing the Huck Finn reading was that Tom Sawyer does not let Jim know that he is free. And he does it for a very childish reason, which is that he being Tom Sawyer just wants to have fun and wants to be entertained. And that really, really, really comes out when you read original Tom Sawyer. Is that he's just so incredibly naive about things, I guess. But he's also just such a child. And then one of the things I think that people still like Tom Sawyer and remember Tom Sawyer as being kind of the better of the two is that they read Tom Sawyer when they're young and they don't read Huck Finn. They just know that Huck Finn has the N-word a whole bunch of times in it. Right. So that's that. Yeah, anything else to talk about with Tom Sawyer? Yeah. I mean, I really don't have anything else to really say about Tom Sawyer. You could teach this to 6th grade, 7th grade, maybe if you're pushing it 8th grade, if you don't have particularly good readers, maybe into 8th grade. But yeah, it's a very, very, very boyish, very, 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 very kid-like, which is just so weird when you compare it to Huck Finn, which is only supposedly a year later, and written by someone who's also pretty well portrayed as being very boyish. But yeah, that is Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and that is probably the last book before I go to camp.